2 दिनों के 2 शामों के कार्यक्रम में पहली शाम हम आपका कृतज्ञतापूर्वक स्वागत करते हैं। जैसा कि आप जानते हैं, नटरंग प्रतिष्ठान विशेषतः उत्तर भारत के रंगमंच का एक बहुत बड़ा अभिलेखागार और पुस्तकालय है। स्वर्गीय श्री नेमिचंद्र जैन के अपने निजी संग्रहालय में जो अपार रंग सामग्री एकत्र हुई थी दशकों तक, वो सब इस संग्रहालय में है। और नटरंग पत्रिका, बल्कि पत्रिका पहले निकली और प्रतिष्ठान बाद में बना उसी नाम से। जैसा कि आप जानते हैं कि नटरंग पत्रिका हिंदी की रंगमंच की एक बहुत पुरानी और प्रतिष्ठित पत्रिका है। ये कहते हुए मुझे थोड़ा संकोच होता है कि नाम मात्र के लिए मैं इन दिनों उसका संपादक भी हूँ, इसलिए स्वयं उस पत्रिका की प्रशंसा नहीं करनी चाहिए, लेकिन कुछ तथ्य तो आपको बताए जा सकते हैं। संपादन तो वैसे रश्मि करती हैं और इसलिए श्रेय भी उन्हीं को जाता है। तो थोड़ा बहुत जो दुष्श्रेय है, लापरवाही इत्यादि का, वो मुझ पर आता है। रंग संवाद हमने बहुत बरस पहले शुरू किया था और जिसमें इरादा ये था कि अव्वल तो निर्देशक और कलाकार रंगमंच पर तो बहुत बोलते हैं, लेकिन उससे अलग अपनी रंग दृष्टि के बारे में, अपने रंग यात्रा के बारे में कम बोलते हैं। हमारे यहाँ इसकी परंपरा बहुत अधिक नहीं है। तो नटरंग प्रतिष्ठान ने रंग संवाद के नाम से ये शुरू की और आपको याद होगा कि हमने मास्टर फिदा हुसैन, फैज़ल अलकाजी, अनामिका हक्सर, अरविंद गौड़, महेश एलकुंचवार, बंसी कौल, हरे कृष्ण अरोड़ा, राजेंद्र नाथ, नंद किशोर आचार्य, सलीमा रज़ा, विजया मेहता, सत्यदेव दुबे, राज बिसारिया, जोहरा सैगल आदि से रंग संवाद आयोजित किए हैं। और आज नीलम मानसिंह चौधरी। अब नीलम मानसिंह चौधरी के बारे में कुछ कहने में मुझे संकोच इसलिए है कि वे मेरी बहुत पुरानी और पारिवारिक मित्र हैं। हम लोगों ने साथ साथ भारत भवन में जो बहुत बहुनिंदित काम है वो किया है, और रंगमंडल जो कारण जी ने स्थापित किया था उसको एक बहुत सुदृढ़ पीठिका देने में नीलम मानसिंह की बहुत भूमिका थी। नीलम ने उसके बाद चंडीगढ़ पहुंचने पर अपनी एक नई रंग शैली विकसित की और आज वो उस शैली के लिए जानी जाती हैं। वो इस समय देश के श्रेष्ठतम निर्देशकों में गिनी जाती हैं, जो उचित ही है। और उनके साथ और 2-4 लोगों को और मिलाकर रंगकर्म में स्त्री के उत्कर्ष की भी गाथा एक तरह से निर्देशन के क्षेत्र में उन जैसे लोगों से शुरू होती है। उन्होंने फिर अब यूँ करने को तो उन्होंने बहुत सारे काम किए हैं, बहुत सारे पापड़ बेले हैं जिसको कहते हैं। हालांकि पापड़ बेलना शायद उनको ना आता होगा, लेकिन उन्होंने पंजाब विश्वविद्यालय के रंगमंच विभाग की अध्यक्षता की है। वो शायद पंजाबी संगीत नाटक अकादमी की अध्यक्ष भी रही हैं। वो और बहुत सारे काम इस तरह के करती रही हैं, पर उनकी संस्था कंपनी ने बहुत अद्भुत काम पिछले कई वर्षों से किया है, जिनमें एक जो इम्पर्सोनेशन की परंपरा थी पंजाब में, नक्कालों वाली, उसको आधुनिक रंगकर में इस्तेमाल करने की, जिसकी एक तरह से शुरुआत भारत भवन में रंगमंडल में हुई थी, जहाँ पारंपरिक कलाकारों और शहराती कलाकारों को मिलाकर काम करने की आदत शुरू हुई थी। हालांकि वो लगती नहीं है, लेकिन वो डॉक्टरेट है और मतलब PhD बाकायदा उनको मिली हुई है, कोई मानद इत्यादि नहीं। ऐसे लोग हैं जिनकी, मुझे भी एक मानद मिल रही है इंसिडेंटली। अब मैं मिलेगी तो तब उसके बाद मैं सोचूंगा कि उसका इस्तेमाल करूं कि ना करूं। तो वो डॉक्टर नीलम मानसिंह चौधरी हैं, बाकायदा डॉक्टरेट पा चुकी हैं। और उनके जो प्रसिद्ध नाटक हैं, उन्होंने बहुत बड़े लोगों के साथ काम किया है। इब्राहिम अलकाजी, बाबा कारंत, और बाबा कारंत बरसों तक उनकी प्रस्तुतियों के लिए संगीत देने जाते रहे हैं। वो यहीं से जाते थे तो उनसे मुलाकात होती थी, फिर जब लौट के आते थे तब भी मुलाकात होती थी और कुछ खट्टी मिट्टी यादें वो बताते रहते, ज़्यादातर मीठी, कभी कभी कुछ खट्टी भी। जसमा ओढ़न, ही रांझा राजा भरथरी, लोक कथा, किचन कथा, नागमंडल, यरमा, अनपोस्टेड लव लेटर, द सूट, शहर मेरे दी पागल औरत, सीबो इन सुपरमार्केट, फिदा, ब्लड वेडिंग, लिटिल ईयोल्फ, द वाइफ लेटर इत्यादि। और देश के प्रसिद्ध रंग समारोहों में और संसार के बहुत प्रतिष्ठित रंग समारोहों में, जिनमें एडिनबरा और पर्थ और आविन्यो इत्यादि शामिल है, नीलम मानसिंह अपनी प्रस्तुतियां कर चुकी हैं। इसके पहले कि हम उनसे कहें कि वो अपने रंग कार्य के बारे में बताएं, हमारे बीच कविता नागपाल हैं जो रंग समीक्षक हैं और बरसों से औरों को भी देखती रही हैं, नीलम मानसिंह के काम को भी देखती रही हैं। तो उनसे आग्रह है कि वो हमारी ओर से नीलम मानसिंह को फूल देकर सम्मानित करें। Neelam Mansingh Chaudhary now talking to you. At the end of it, we will have a brief question answer session and we will come back to it. Neelam Mansingh.
Should I come there?
Or you, wherever you like.
We go back a long, long way and it's wonderful to be here. I will have to speak in English, so you must forgive me my inadequacies. It's always very problematic to structure a talk when you don't really know who you're speaking to. I did try and ask Rashmi and Kirti that who exactly will be the audience. So they said it's going to be a mixed kind of audience. So I'm sharing a few thoughts which may seem like a series of non sequiturs. I'm going to be talking about processes. I'm going to be talking about how I work with my actors. It's going to be a more personalized journey into this world of theatre. Theatre, as we know, is make-believe. It is play. It is becoming someone else. Many people, gods, characters, demons, trees, animals, anything living or non-living that can be temporarily conceived on the stage by the actor makes theatre. I should bring it a little lower. Is this better? Is this fine? Or as it is conceptualized? Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe I should begin from the beginning.
And don't go so fast.
Okay, thank you. I always feel that people might get bored and run away, so better say my bit fast. Theatre is make-believe. It is play. It is becoming somebody else or becoming many people, characters, gods, demons, trees, and animals. Anything living or non-living that can be temporarily conceived on the stage by the actor makes theatre. Or as it is conceptualized in the word Maya or Leela, a place for illusion, for magic to be manifested. Theatre is about the power of the transformation of an actor into a character, from the real to the imaginary. Performance is an illusion, but sometimes that illusion can be more truthful and more real than our everyday experience. Theatre events are always improvisational, experimental. Any semiotics on theatre are always on shaky and unstable ground, made even more slippery by the uncertainty and subjectivity through which they are viewed. Every time I prepare a new production, I keep on wondering if I still know how to direct. I always start from point zero. My actors often tell me, "You have many years of experience behind you. Why this uncertainty?" But I say to myself, perhaps I know a little better how to search and process. Theatre is an adventure because one never knows where it's going to take one. One never knows what will be the shape and form of the production until it bursts forth before an audience. Whenever I decide to direct a play, I choose the text according to my state of mind. I look for myself in the characters that are being portrayed. Every production of mine becomes a world that I create along with my actors. I become linked with the story of the characters and become as much part of that journey as the actors. When I, as a director, create a performance, it is based on the least tangible elements of my experience. It is my way of responding to the world in a way which is not always conscious or deliberate, but mysterious and deeply felt. We all know that the actors and their imagination are the sole arbiters on the stage, which they make manifest through their performance. That becomes the theory and the methodology and practice. There are methods, and every director has one. Maybe an unconscious one. I'm sure I have one too. I don't really know. What is significant for me is to watch and listen to the actors during rehearsals. I do this with passion and concentration. If I had to formulate a theory, it would be to believe in what you and your actors are doing. It is essential that the actor feels like a child, learning, seeing, experiencing everything afresh. It is not only by becoming a child, but by entering into your childhood. The most significant aspects of how a character evolves and grows are actually part of the unrecorded history of the actors, their stories, their testimonies, and their struggle to reach the spirit or the essence of their character. As a director, my role is to provide the hawk's eye, never relaxed, never losing sight. Each lapse in concentration or an actor resorting to a cliche is pounced upon and plucked out. I am more in the business of creating theatre or analyzing plays or creating a visual image to unearth the hidden text. As a theatre director, certain questions have concerned me. First and foremost, the issue of language. When I first set up my theatre company, my head was filled with stereotypical images of Punjabi theatre. The representation of what constitutes Punjabi culture had become fixed and ossified, with attributes to it being loud, frivolous, crass, comic, like the representation of the language, which had become a parody of itself thanks to Hindi films and part of popular imagination. The cliche that reiterates that Punjab is agriculture but no culture was to me a very strange and alienating statement that was constantly being brandished around in a manner that was fairly dismissive. I have never been able to separate culture from agriculture. To till the land and see a plant that you have sown grow and become a tree is akin to the joy that an artist feels when he makes a painting or writes a poem. Culture is linked with agriculture. Culture is nourished by agriculture. B.V. Karant's words of advice on leaving Bhopal and Bharat Bhavan resonated within me. Whatever work you do must be done in the language of the state, with local people and regional energies. You must regionalize the national and nationalize the regional. Being a Punjabi, I had a natural affinity with the language, and it was the language in which I could express myself most effectively. I recall very vividly that whenever I mentioned that I was doing Punjabi theatre, the funds, the sponsors, the audience shied away from giving me any support. The myth of Punjab having no culture was a reality in the minds of the potential patrons. But today, I think the scenario has reversed thanks to the work that we have been doing continuously for a long time. But today, despite that, and contrary to that, it is truly odd that even today there is a large section of people in Punjab who constantly request me to do a play in English. A question that ironically has never been asked in any part of the country or in any part of the world where I have performed. When I first arrived in Chandigarh in 1984, I attended a lecture by a distinguished theatre critic who, while delivering a paper on Indian culture, referred to Punjabi culture as a balle balle culture with a dismissive gesture of his hand. At that time, I made light of the jibe, but in retrospect, it really bothered me. To me, this seemed like a full-blown dilemma of description. It was difficult working in an environment that mocked its own culture. Along with this was the pusillanimous attitude of the Punjab government towards the arts. One incident that stands out very sharply was when my group was invited to the Festival d'Avignon. The Punjab government had agreed to fund the travel. Details had been worked out, airline identified, the baggage weight, And 2 weeks before the departure, I was tersely informed that the Chief Minister had refused to sign the grant file. Even more ridiculous was the explanation offered. The then Chief Minister had lost a local by-election and he was in no frame of mind to be generous to a local theatre company that was performing in France. I have no voters in Avignon, he said. Why should I waste my money on shows that bring no political benefits to the party? So much for the state as a patron of the arts. As a theatre director working in the Punjabi language, I am concerned with doing theatre, not trapped by the question of whether what I do is regional or national. I work in the language of the state with actors from the state in which I live. It is ironic that I am perceived in Punjab as a director who is not one of us. The reason being, I take stories and plays from different parts of the world rather than direct plays created by Punjabi playwrights. It is strange that though we are quick to defend the freedom of the artist, we sometimes hail attacks at those who do not fit into the boundaries of expectations. I believe that any play, text or literature carried from one language to another enriches and adds to the living tradition of theatre. I will give you a little example. While doing Little Eyolf by Ibsen, I completely plunged into the world of Ibsen. Initially, I was completely lost because the specific cultural values that seemed so deeply embedded in the works of Ibsen made me a trifle skeptical on how they would travel all the way to Punjab without losing their essence. Ibsen, as you know, talks a lot about redemption and resurrection. He has a great sense of Catholicism, which becomes very problematic if you have to kind of make it travel. The beautiful Norwegian landscape with its fjords and islands and jutting headlands is not a visual experience that I had. Chandigarh is a landlocked place anyway. And I felt very strongly that most of Ibsen's characters have internalized the landscape within them, and it is through this environment that they perceive the universe. Despite the individual variations, its local usage and societal norms seemed so far removed from my context. Yet, they did not in any way cancel out the underlying bonds that I developed with the characters, allowing me to interact with them in a remade environment. Ashokji has mentioned my work with the Nakals. I remember a little aside, when we were in Bhopal, I used to say Karanji, Swamiji, Nirmalji, who were all the big stalwarts there. And Ashok would say to me, why aren't you calling me Ji? So today I kind of balanced that out. The Nakal tradition through which I explored my work belonged to rural Punjab. Again, this really came from the most wonderful 4 years that I had with B.V. Karanth in Bhopal, where we talked a lot about theatre not being a performance but also creating a movement and also creating a vocabulary in which to train actors. Most of us from drama schools at that time had been trained by the Stanislavski system. A lot of people in different regions were dipping into their own local traditions to find a way of training urban actors. So carrying that experience with me to Chandigarh, I came across a group of Nakals that I started working with. Nakals is really from the word nakal, which means to imitate. It's a Persian word. The Nakal tradition through which I explored my work belonged to rural Punjab and did not have well-developed theatrical traditions in terms of its aesthetics, techniques and style. But working with traditional actors and urban actors helped me in exploring a theatrical lexis where unusual encounters could happen. This was an attempt to reach a space where the distinction between conflicting histories did not matter and which could be explored to express my own creative affinities. The Nakal tradition has a repertoire of storytelling, raucous humor, wild singing, along with a very strong tradition of dancing that is performed by female impersonators. This performance cannot be classified under the pantheon of high art or classical, as it is local, vernacular and entertainment oriented. My group today is a mix of rural actors actors and urban performers. This combination has become for me my theatrical metaphor. It is a collective enterprise without any hierarchy. It enables me to explore a multiplicity of styles, with each actor having the space to explore his own personal voice. The urban actors have grown up in the city and obtained an urban modern education. By putting such a company together, I have tried to produce a somewhat precarious, somewhat unstable meeting of folk, tradition and the modern, as between setting up an equation between the female impersonators and actors. The core of my work has been to see this group of people from different social, economic and cultural backgrounds make a theatrical event together. For me, the most important aspect of people coming together is to make the act of theatre inseparable from the needs of the people to come together, to establish links, to make connections and find new ways of working and creating. Through this encounter, new protocols were invented. I found during the course of my work a willingness in both the urban and the rural actors to shed the skin of their separateness and enter into the cultural and emotional terrains of each other's life. Using the energies of tradition with urban attitudes, I work towards a crossing over not only of gender but also towards the dynamics of exchange, interplay and interpretation. Preparing for a role is a constant state of training, so that when a situation arises, one is ready to do that which is appropriate for the scene. Improvisations are considered a valid process for preparing a role. But this should not in any way suggest only the spontaneous response of the moment, because what arises spontaneously is the moment itself. When this happens intuitively and without tension, it releases a feeling of sheer spontaneity. As a great theorist and director Stanislavski said in his book An Actor Prepares, that one has to work very hard to appear spontaneous on stage. That is to say that a performance is not only rehearsed but also prepared. This involves a search for a space that is both visible and invisible, in which truths can be grounded through play and storytelling. Most of the actors who are part of my theatre production have worked with me for 27 years. Oops. The work that I've done with them has already given them a sense of self-discipline required for an ongoing sense of learning regarding the work. But with each play, I expect them to work beyond the theatrical conventions that they have accumulated over the years. The first process is to make them shed acquired mannerisms, gestures, voice patterns from previous successful productions. I always like to make my actors work in alternative spaces. I like to take them away from their familiar rehearsal spaces and make them, for example, do a death scene in a kitchen, a crowd scene under a table, a rape scene in a trolley, and to have a meal in a bathtub. To play the scene illogically and irrationally can sometimes reveal fresh dimensions of the way it can be played in complete contrast to the way it is written. This method, at least for me and my group, throws up endless surprises in the way scenes can be conceived and constructed outside the conventional ways of working. I like the actors to create a relationship with objects. In most of my plays, we are very much surrounded by what you call the inanimate world, and how the actor, through their connection, make them alive. Whatever they do, I always tell them that whatever objects you have on the stage, they must be treated in terms of working with them in actuality. If they write a letter, they must not simulate the action, but actually physically write the letter using the same time as required for the action to go through its Johar cue, beginning, middle and end. They must believe in the action that they are undertaking and believe in the physicality of the action. Truth of the action, I believe, can lead to the truth of the emotions. I'll give you an example. In 2004, the actor Lisa Ray came to prepare for the role of a widow in Deepa Mehta's film Water. Her coming to Chandigarh and working with my group was an attempt to give her a window into another kind of life. Lisa had spent a major part of her life between Bombay and Toronto, Toronto. Being transported to a village in Punjab was an unusual experience for her. Making cow dungs, bathing under a water pump, washing clothes in the river, milking the cows exposed her to an entirely different rhythm of life and its relationships. What was interesting for me to observe was whether actors from different cultural backgrounds could transcend the habits formed by the society within which they live and take the risk of entering into unexpected zones outside the circle of their experience. My workshop with her was based on the premise that if an actor experiences the physical world of the character he or she is portraying, then a new set of principles can be inscribed on the body. This may seem like an artifice, but changed material circumstances can alter inner reality. I understand that when Ben Kingsley played the role of Gandhi, he prepared for the role by becoming a vegetarian, learning to spin the wheel, sleeping on a hard floor, wearing a dhoti, and also practicing celibacy. Rehearsal for me is a ritual through which an intricate network of relationships and images will emerge. Nothing in my rehearsals is pre-planned. Everything is a surprise. I've always avoided having intellectual discussions with my actors about the text, as I do believe that the rational mind is not such a powerful tool in creativity and instincts. Thank you. Thank you. That's nice. I've tried to avoid intellectual discussions with my actors around the text, as I do believe that the rational mind is not such a powerful tool for creativity as instincts, intuitions, and make-believes are. The development of the intuition in theatre is stimulated in many different ways through the body. The body is the vehicle and the carrier of different memories, instincts, and also is the mediator of all experiences. During rehearsals, the actors and myself collaborate in creating a visual language that will extend the meaning of the narrative or perhaps create a parallel text. But these images are always discovered from within the text. It could be also sometimes the invisible or the unwritten text that needs to be dug out. The way this preparation is done is to allow the actor a lot of time for improvisations, giving situations from the play and making the actor position himself within that situation, using whatever he can lay his hands on: trunk, sticks, cloth, food, leaves, stones, colors, newspapers, makeup, simple everyday objects that make up our daily life and ordinary life. The endless ways, now I'm going to talk about space. The endless ways in which space can be transformed, articulated, and animated is what I experienced when I built an amphitheater in the back of my house. But the vagaries of the weather and irascible neighbors forced me to find an alternative space. The adjoining house belonged to a relative and had been lying semi-constructed for a long time. It is interesting to note that how this shift in space from an amphitheater to an enclosed space changed the nature of my work. When we worked outdoors, my productions had endless entries and exits, flamboyant costumes, rickshaws, crowd scenes, and elaborate sets. It now became more restrictive, intimate, and contained. Once the actors made their entry on stage, they never left it, as there were no exit points available. The other interesting factor was that all backstage activities ceased as there was no backstage that they had. Due to working in an intimate space and seeing the actors from close proximity, I could hear the changed patterns in the actors' breathing during an emotional scene. This also changed my approach towards acting. From grand gestures, one shifted to a more minimized and controlled form of acting. I remember that this run down with peeling paints and naked bulbs suspended from wires that had been pulled from across our house, had a festival director from Perth saying, "Peter Brook would have spent millions of dollars to create a space like this." It is essential that the rehearsal space creates a place where an actor feels safe, because it is only in that space that he is sharing his deepest emotions and thoughts with a group without fear of failure. I do not understand the concept of the director who monitors every pause and controls each movement of the actor, as if he is designing a mathematical formula, forgetting that actors are alive and their bodies have a will of their own. In 1992, when I created Yarma, the laundresses scene in Yarma, which is fairly central to the play, and in a certain way shows that layer of society which represents a community in which Yarma has been placed. In the original text, this scene happens on the banks of a river. I shifted it to a dhobi ghat. To go back down memory lane, near our home in Amritsar, where I grew up and where I was born, in the medical college where my father was a doctor and we had a house within the medical campus, we had a dhobi ghat right across the road, where the clothes and sheets from the various hospitals and hostels were washed. The stone blocks where clothes were washed had black water running through it. Bare-bodied dhobis lined up against a stone parapet, swizzing a length of cloth in the air before slapping it down on the hard surface, leaving a debris of dirt, detergent and soap suds. I would roll up my salwar as a child and, like the dhobis, plunge myself into the water, feeling my feet sink into the mud. The water bubbled between my toes while the drying clothes danced in the sun. Endless yards of dyed turban and long saris became somewhere the leitmotif for my scene in the laundresses scene. While choreographing the scene, I recognized the connection between my memories and these images. The realization of the overlapping of life, fiction, creativity and play blossomed within me with a force that I've still not forgotten. Nagmandala, which I had done in 1989, to revisit the same in 2005 was a difficult decision. How do I wipe the slate clean, get rid of all the baggage of the previous production? The task becomes even more difficult when part of the actors are the same as well as the music. Revisiting a play also means that I had to consciously avoid using any of the images, movements or choreography of the previous play. It was almost, I'm sure we're all familiar with Nagamandala, it was almost as if I was playing my own duality along with the characters of the play. I approached the play with playfulness, making the actors improvise from the play without the text, nudging them into taking risks, slowing off fixed approaches, pushing them towards developing their own personal vocabulary, continuously urging them to experiment, provoking them to explore the ambiguous world that Girish Karnad creates, where fictional characters and real characters intermingle and the lines between the invisible and the visible are blurred. Certain extraordinary things happen during rehearsal, which I try to hold on to, with the hope that the spontaneous recklessness does not get lost in a more structured performance. I have always been more interested in process than in results. For Nagmandala, the actors were told to pick up whatever they wished. As our rehearsal place is right near the garden, I found that they picked up a lot of garden implements. For the scene of the chorus of flames, the actors squashed themselves in a wheelbarrow and carrying a basket with tea and biscuits and other edibles that had been left over from their tea break. This was the scene of the chorus of flames who had escaped from their homes to come to an abandoned temple. It was as if the metaphysical elements in the play are given a situation that is fairly mundane. The clash between the mundane and the fantastical provided for me the dramatic tension. In the transformation scene, where the husband becomes the snake after drinking the magic potion, the actor playing the role runs wildly from one end of the stage to the other, rising, falling, banging his head against the wall. He then falls into a huge tub, which is then covered with a very heavy piece of cloth. The cloth becomes the force through which he struggles to break free. The cloth swaying and flapping with the force of the actor's struggle makes it seem, for me, I don't know if the same experience was felt by the audience, as if a mythic and epic struggle is going on between man and the forces of nature. Then there is sudden silence and the cloth is thrown thrown aside, and he slithers out of the tub to meet his beloved. It's almost as if there's been a new birth has taken place. I'll talk about Kitchen Katha. In Kitchen Katha, which is performed in 2000, for many years I had been toying with the idea of cooking live on the stage to celebrate the potential of plunging into another world. A world that was filled with the aroma of mustard seeds and cumin, with an actor performing with the sting of onion juice in his eyes, and musicians singing while grinding wheat or grain or lighting the fire. Cooking was the central element, but aspects of theatre could not be ignored or undermined. To create a balance between the real time of cooking and stage time, the action had to be tightly choreographed with military precision and order. The backstage area resembled a kitchen where actors prepared for the show by partially cooking the food, as uncooked food affects the success of the show as much as an uncooked performance. The cast delivered their lines, sang songs, played musical instruments while stirring the pot, kneading flour, boiling potatoes, and at the same time trying to retain their dignity as actors. Consuming food on stage while managing lines and giving expressions require not only dexterity but also an understanding of your own digestive system. Kitchen Katha is a story about women and food and has no fixed narrative. Here the actor is telling a story of her grandmother in a community kitchen. Again, memories of growing up in a gurdwara in my early childhood are very much was very much the experience that I brought into the entire play, because my father's grandfather had his own gurdwara in Chandigarh, and he lived in the gurdwara, and it had a huge langar. I remember as a child coming from Amritsar to Chandigarh and getting up at 4 in the morning and cooking in the community kitchen, and this whole sense of plentitude or the cornucopia of food which is shared with people is very much part of a real experience which entered into my workspace. I used a series of ideas which could have fallen into ambiguity, but due to the conviction and emotional integrity of the actors, all these ideas got a tangible and material shape. I remember in Kitchen Katha, I'd suspended a pumpkin at the entrance of the kitchen, strung on a bamboo frame, a little swing on which a pumpkin is balanced. I don't know why that pumpkin seemed like what I wished to choose from the vegetable world. My actor said, "Why a pumpkin?" I said, "I don't know, it just seems right." My actors then asked me what this pumpkin symbolized. I really had no answer. Anyway, they accepted it as a valid reason for being there, because that is the kind of trust that is generated when a group works together for so many years. A few years later, Kirti, Anuradha and myself went to Pondicherry, and we saw that outside each shop there was a pumpkin. I was really quite surprised, and I asked the shopkeeper, "Why do you have a pumpkin suspended outside your shops?" And they said, "Because we feel it's auspicious and keeps the evil eye away." We make certain choices which our immediate memory is unaware of, but somewhere in the archives of our mind, something is stored which can then resurface spontaneously in our creative space. I hope you're not getting bored. One other play I will refer to is The Suit, which is written by Can Themba, and who's a South African writer. The story is about the failure of marriage and betrayal, and how a man and a woman deeply in love with each other. One day the man goes to work and he finds out from his friend that while he's away in the office, his wife gets in a lover. He turns back, comes home and sees his wife in bed with another man. The lover jumps out of the window but leaves his suit behind. You can't find a more cliche situation than that. The suit then becomes a symbol of apartheid. And how throughout the play, this shadow that pursues their life in the form of a suit on a hanger becomes the constant presence of South African politics. But when I decided to do The Suit, which is a short 3-page story, there was no I could not actually use the political references. I could have said, let's use this or let's use that, let's use something else. But it would have just seemed like a superimposition because it was just not organic to the way I was looking at the text. And I thought that the story was powerful enough. It was about betrayal, alienation, infidelity. I thought there were powerful elements which could make a story. The 3-page story with sketchily described characters and Pathar's poetry that did not blend with the narrative became a huge stumbling block because, I work with one of the leading poets, Surjit Pathar, who does most of my translation work. In The Suit, and Pathar being a poet, more than translation, he's interested to interject the entire text with poetic interruptions that happened, at least in The Suit. The actors struggled to merge the poetry with the narrative. It would have been very easy for me to erase the poems, but I was loath to do that, as the poetry gave the entire production a sort of philosophical tenor. How do we resolve these contradictions? Through improvisations, we managed to create 2 separate rhythms for the play. One was on the surface level of events that carried the narrative forward. The other was the ethical and social dilemmas that were expressed through Pathar's poems and also helped in creating the visual imagery of the play. When the husband hears about his wife's infidelity, there's a storm of emotions that he goes through. I told the actor, do spot running. And he builds up a certain kind of energy while running in one particular place and then collapses, which almost gave me the feeling as if a whole edifice was crumbling. And then he clings on to that which is familiar because the emotional charges like he's lost everything, which is a tiffin which his wife packs for him every morning. He clings on to the tiffin, opens a tiffin and finds that it is full of freshly cooked rice, and he starts stuffing it into his mouth. But wo halak ke niche nahi jata, and he spews it out. So in a certain way, one tried to create the everyday ordinary objects that we are surrounded by to actually extend the meaning of the narrative and also in a certain way to underscore the internal dilemma or emotional upheaval that was happening within the character. On another level, the wife's anguish is shown by washing clothes. How a mundane action of washing transforms slowly into a scene of self-flagellation. The same self-flagellation was later extended to when the husband oils his body, in slapping himself in a sense of self-loathing. In the end, the ultimate humiliation that he exercises on his wife when he tells her to make love to the suit, suggestions of necrophilia. The actors worked on a combination of death dance and dirty dancing before they arrive at the point where he forces her to make love to the suit in an act of horrific voyeurism. We have to keep reminding ourselves that it is not only the actor that grows in journeys, it is also the director. The performer, through improvisation, surprises the director and makes the text come alive in different ways. There is no master template we seek to follow, merely thoughts, ideas, directions, and potentials. So then, what is the essence of training? If it is not the practice of teaching them something we know and making them bring a text alive in accordance with our vision. The most succinct way I can put it is thus. It is an attempt to eliminate resistance to something new and think out of the box. Not so much a collection of skills, but an eradication of blocks, an opening out towards the future. In theatre, we are all hurtled towards the future through the now. The trainer in me watches my actors perform from a tiny corner in the wings, skin upon skin, animating and encountering each other, giving us a peep into the complex whole that strings the images together. the joys, laughters, tears and pain of the characters enter into the memory of the actor, inscribed on flesh, imprinted on the soul. Seeing my actors walk onto the stage, carrying my ideas and vision before the audience, untethered, I feel a pleasurable redundancy. And for me, the end of any transition between text and performance is this, becoming vaporous like a ghost, exorcised by the performance. The trainer has to disappear. We are propelled into the future during the performance, forgetting the events that have led us to that very moment. Training, for me, does not mean an acquisition of knowledge as much as a liberation from quotidian events, erasing and subsuming everything for that very moment when the performance meets its audience. Thank you.
Apart from being a brilliant tour across a big life in the theatre, it was good length. And now is the time for you to ask questions. Brevity remains the soul of wit. So instead of making large comments, lengthy comments, ask questions, provoking maybe long answers.
For music and with Surjit Singh Pathar for the scripts, has that in any way, sort of impacted on the kind of work that you do?
Well, I think in a certain way, Karan gave me a very amazing legacy for my work, which is music. Today, I cannot think of a play without music. And so that, and also the 4 years that I worked with him, he gave me a certain sense of how to, he actually gave me a signature in a very unconscious way. So I think working with Karan really opened my eyes, gave me a vision, gave me a sense of direction. For me, he's my master. And working with Surjit Pathar, of course, has been very, very significant, because the kind of, when I work with Patharji, I don't have to actually tell him, I don't see it as an adaptation, because the translation is so effective, because language is not only what we hear and or sounds, but it is also myth, cultural history, imagery, idiomatic sentences. So I think working with these two stalwarts have certainly given me a great support system. I don't think I would have been sitting here if I didn't have these two wonderful people who kind of supported and became my collaborators. So they have played a very intrinsic role.
You all same gender. Why is this situation? Women directors and men directors.
Known as women's theatre kind of evolved sometimes somewhere in the late 80s, early 90s, but I think soon that time has passed. Today we will be known as artists rather than identified by our gender.
I think the time has come for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I don't see myself as a woman director, because when I create, I feel completely androgynous.
The men directors would now have to say that we are men directors.
My name is Sudhir Tandon. One is that the very nature of performance is to concretize words, text, and through performance also concretize the intent. Now, a sensitive director like you who has exposure to various art forms, there is always a tendency to go beyond that concretization and to abstract things. So how do you handle this tension between the need to concretize and also to go in for abstraction? My second question is that increasingly in this country now we are seeing that say in visual arts there is this trend of having a curatorial practice. Do you think that now there is also
he says, come back to me, and she says never, and she hurls this red color paint or blood or whatever towards him, and suddenly a white rang patti comes up, And then at the Karanji had created beautiful sounds of the Rudali, but in a much more dramatic manner. When I took this play to London, one of the critics in The Guardian wrote, it was, that hurling of the pot and the red paint or red blood or whatever was the stilling of the menstrual cycle. It was the blood of Christ. Now, in no way did his understanding of the play disturb my narrative. In fact, to me, it added and extended the meaning of what I was trying to say. Because somewhere, there's no such thing as a shared narrative. Each one brings his or her own interpretation to what is being shown. Even if I do a local play, meaning can never be universal. It will always be on the perception, interpretation, or interest, or something may not happen. So I personally don't think you lose anything. Now I take a suit which is about apartheid, and I remove that whole political issue and make it just into a tale of people and betrayal and infidelity. To me, that was strong enough emotionally to become a dramatic piece. Your second question I've forgotten.
Sensuousness.
Sensuousness. Well, maybe it's got something to do with my own nature and my own sense of tactile. When I did Kitchen Katha, just for me the cutting of the papaya and seeing the two halves of the papaya with the little seeds as the seeds of life, or when she eats the pomegranate and it drops on the white cloth. It was the first time she makes love, and the breaking of the hymen. So somewhere there is a thought behind each choice, a definitive thought. So when you give an object to the actor, what are the instructions you give? What is the dialogue you have? Now, for example, in Fedra, when I started doing Fedra, I found that the moment the male actors came on the stage or in the rehearsal space, I became completely blocked. I didn't know what to do with them. And I remember speaking to my friend Anuradha Kapoor and saying, I don't know what to do, I can't work with the men in the play. And she said, just throw out the men. So I thought that's very interesting. So now, there was an absence of the men, but theirs is the presence that sets into motion the entire text or the narrative. So then I had to show this whole sensuality, and I thought grain, to me, wheat is, the sound, the touch. Every time I go to a pansari ki dukaan, I plunge my hand into the boris of dal or wheat. So maybe, they are your own personal proclivities, affiliations, I don't know what. So I put the actor in a huge langar ka parat. As I told you, the langar never leaves me. In a huge langar ka parat, filled to the brim with grain. And her churning in that whole thing. Each play maybe I'm just a sensual person, I don't know. Or maybe who knows. These are the cheapest thing to use on the stage. We work with very little budget, so water, fire, leaves, anaj, these are very easy things to get. So every practical choice, every aesthetic choice you make also has to be a practical one. Sorry? When I was in the Department of Fine Arts, Balwant Gargi had just come back from Seattle, and he was freelancing. The Department of Indian Theatre had not been set up. This was in 70-71. The department was set up in 72. By that time I joined the National School of Drama. So I remember Gargi coming to our department and asking for volunteers to work in his play, The Maids by Jean Genet. So I put my hand up, and that little putting up my hand actually gave me a new life. So I worked in his play, The Maids. I worked in Antigone by Jean Honoré. And then it was at that time that Ibrahim Al-Qazi had brought 2 plays from the National School of Drama to Chandigarh. And because we were in the arts department, we were asked to go and usher and help in backstage. So I was very fascinated by the atmosphere that existed backstage. More than theatre, I was fascinated by the ease that existed between men and women. It was something that I had never seen in my provincial Amritsar, where segregation of the sexes was such a defined and such a slotted kind of thing. So more than theatre, it was really the atmosphere that theatre seemed to suggest that made me join the National School of Drama. And I was very lucky because that time there were hardly any women who applied. I'm sure if today I had to apply, nobody would take me into theatre because I was so bad at the interview.
मैं प्रकाश हूँ.
She was junior to me.
जी
मेरा प्रकाश झाड़ू में होते रहे हैं. तो क्या आप जब स्क्रिप्टिंग करते हैं या तो उस समय उसके सिलेक्शन में भारतीय दर्शक से ज्यादा कहीं विदेशों के दर्शकों को सोच करके तो नहीं तैयार किया जा रहा है, या क्या आपका सोच क्या रहता है आपकी स्क्रिप्टिंग को सिलेक्शन करने में कि विदेशों में ज्यादा शोध होते हैं, इंडिया में कम होते हैं?
ऐसा नहीं है, but anyway, to answer your, when I create, I wear the robe of a priest. जब आप क्रिएट करते हैं तो तब खाली आप होते हैं और आपका काम होता है. दर्शक तो बहुत बाद में आते हैं, तो इसलिए ये कहना मुझे थोड़ा सा अजीब सा लगता है. और ये बात सही नहीं. बाहर जाती हूँ तो शायद पेपर में आ जाता है. जब अमृतसर में करती हूँ या लुधियाने में करती हूँ तो पेपर में नहीं आता.
इंपोर्टेड माला में ज़्यादा अच्छा लगता है. ये से बन के जाए तो वहाँ से आ जाए तो ज़्यादा.
Any
I was just thinking that the kind of often felt, मतलब मुझे अक्सर ऐसा लगता है कि when you are treating a particular idea, something like, let's say, the suit, it appears like a very everyday story, and particularly when you're taking out the political resonances, so all elements of allegory have gone out, and yet a very simple story about relationships seemed almost like an epic. So there's something in the treatment, in the way you handle it. I got a clue about it when you said that you wanted to include Pathar's poetry so that it got another level. But is that a conscious thing that you do, that it acquires that level? There's almost a kind of, mythical quality about the work that you do.
Well, I personally feel that you scratch anyone, out comes a Greek tragedy. So it is in simple moments of life that may not fit into the framework of what we think is epic or classical, that momentous things happen. Ordinary life with all its mundanity can be seen as poetic. Why can't the suit, and why can't it be Phaedra or Medea? I think the range of emotions, the range of pain, or the level of sinking deep into your sense of betrayal, for me was equally poignant. So I think when maybe I've got silly thoughts in my head. When you create a play, it has to be dramatic, it has to be theatrical. So maybe in that a certain kind of not that the acting is loud, but a certain kind of, it's like how the ordinary becomes extraordinary, how the familiar becomes unfamiliar. And how does it become unfamiliar? If you create another context for it. By creating another context for it, a new meaning emerges. And a new meaning emerges makes you actually, it may somewhere disturb a certain way of looking at it.
जब अपने ग्रुप के अलग दूसरे ग्रुप के साथ काम करती हैं, उससे जुड़ा हुआ सवाल है. आपने एनएसडी रिपर्टरी के साथ प्ले किया ब्लड वेडिंग. हमारा ये मानना है कि आप जो भी कहना चाह रही होंगी शायद वो कम्युनिकेट नहीं हुआ, और इसकी क्या वजह है? क्या आप कंफर्ट लेवल की बात करती हैं कि आप दूसरे एक्टर्स के साथ वैसा ही कंफर्ट लेवल आपका रहता है? क्या आपको लगता है कि आप कहीं नाकाम रही हैं?
नहीं, मुझे ऐसा नहीं लगा. I enjoyed working with the repertory hugely. बड़ा कॉम्प्लेक्स प्ले है उसमें. मतलब उस वक्त लॉर्का सेरुलिज्म में जा रहे थे, तो उसमें वो सब ही वॉज वेरी क्लोज टू बुनुएल एंड all the serialists of that time. तो it is a very difficult play, and this play जिन्होंने भी attempt किया, it has been doomed for failure. So I don't feel I failed. I enjoyed doing it. और पता है क्या, जो भी कोई काम देखेगा, कुछ ऐसा तो है नहीं कि सबको एक जैसे ही रिसीव करना है. Everybody will receive it in their own particular way. But you do try and feel if you can bind a group of people together into a collective experience and see the performance. But I enjoyed working with the repertory. It was a big challenge for me. It took me a while to settle into the rhythm of working with them, but I felt very comfortable.
नहीं, आपका एंजॉय करना बिल्कुल अलग बात है.
By enjoy, I don't mean मजा लेना. I mean that all the the struggle, the experimentation, the sense of how to to do that शादी का scene where you have 40 people on the stage was a very very difficult and complex task. So for me also it was a very learning process. As I said, that the journey of the actor is not separated from the journey the director takes. You can fail, you can something can work, something doesn't work, but the process has to be, you have a torch and a searchlight.
दूसरा सवाल मेरा ये है कि अभी ऑफ लेट एक जो ट्रेंड ये आ रहा है कि एक मॉडर्निटी के साथ जो है ये थिएटर डायरेक्टर्स अमूमन ये सजेस्ट करने लगे हैं कि उनके लिए लिखे हुए टेक्स्ट का बहुत मायने नहीं रह गया है. इस बारे में आपका क्या कहना है?
जैसे मैंने उनको जवाब दिया था कि जो टेक्स्ट होता है, इट इज एक्चुअली परफॉर्मेटिव टेक्स्ट रादर देन अ लिटरेरी टेक्स्ट. आई थिंक Bertolt Brecht also said कि you take Mother Courage, throw all the pages in the air, put them all together and start the play from there. So I think it's very challenging to reassemble and rearrange a play, or to take an idea and see how it develops into a performance text. So I don't know, these are different ways of working. If you say that the actor must be free to make its choices, then there should also be choices in terms of what they wish to do. So trend नहीं है, मतलब ऐसा ट्रेंड के हिसाब से लोग, I don't see it as a trend. I see it as some choices that are being made by certain creative directors.
You wanted to ask? अच्छा.
I just wanted to ask you, when are you going to produce a nice comedy?
And then yeah. When are you going to do it? You didn't answer.
When are you going to attempt one? When he comes to attempt it.
If I might just add a little bit from what we were saying about text and performance. I think, Neelam, what you said was very interesting, that in any case, there's so many transformations that go from the written word to performance. The first one is with the actors, and then it's with the design, which would be as much transformative. So I would say that I think sometimes we may not actually put such a strict division that what is written on the page is just limited to the page, and that is just one level of meaning and the other levels come up. So I got very interested when you said this, but also when you said something very much earlier on in your talk, that when you work, it's about clearing the blocks of an actor, and not so much about directing her or him in one direction. Is there a connection between this and the way you deal with the text?
I agree with you that the written word is just one dimension of the performance for me. I can't speak for directors in general, but for me, I feel there is the written word, then there is the social and political implications, then there is the whole relationship with space, and then there is that which is intangible and mysterious. So all these layers intertwine in ways where it is difficult to pull out and say this is the text and this is the image and this is how the body is expressing itself. So I feel for me the text comes last. I always tell the actors, this is the idea, let's forget the text, don't get trapped by lines. Because if you get too trapped by lines, then somewhere the other dimensions of creativity will somewhere get overwhelmed. So for me the text, it's in no way am I trying to undermine the text, because the text is the starting point. But it's a starting point, but the development and the circumstances are created through the relationship with space, with the body, with objects, with many intangible elements that go into making a performance alive. Sometimes, I personally feel that if a moment through a gesture can create the meaning of the text, then sometimes I can even erase that text. That's what I feel. About the second question, yes, I think the entire role of the director is really to provide the eye, to actually catch the actor from being repetitive or doing what we call cliche acting. So the whole interaction between me and the actor is basically to put them in a situation which can process their performance in a way where they start dissolving the blocks and allowing themselves to be outrageous, to do things which are unusual. Most of them may not enter into the workspace, but somewhere it can be a very freeing process to make an actor arrive at that moment of making a choice which will be then placed or positioned in the play, in the performance.
Is that all? Well, I think you will all agree that we had a most insightful evening with one of the tallest theatre directors of our time, and I think the discussion was very good, and the way she answered the questions was also very illuminating. So thank you very much, Neelam.
Thank you.
And thank you all of you on behalf of Natarang Pratishthan. And tomorrow at the same time, that is at 6, we meet the Kannada director Jayashree in a similar conversation. So please do come, all of you, and tell all of them who have not come what they have missed today and what they are going to miss if they don't turn up tomorrow. Thank you very much.